So in July, Bibi Netanyahu is set to address Congress. Some Democrats are going to boycott that speech, and we happen to have one of those members of Congress who will not be attending with us, Congressman Ro Khanna. Great to see you again.
Always good to be on set.
Yeah, we love to have you here. Let's go ahead and put this up on the screen. This is kind of amazing to me. It's the headline here. No one knows what he's going to say. White House fears mount about Bibi's D.C. visit. White House has reportedly grown anxious about his upcoming address. They're worried he could directly criticize Joe Biden in front of Congress, which I just get your reaction to this, because this is like the most predictable thing in the world to me. It's no secret Bibi Netanyahu would rather have Donald Trump in office. So what were they even thinking about, the Democrats joining with the Republicans to invite him in to address a joint session here?
It's bewildering and a malpractice. I know exactly what he's going to say because he's put out videos criticizing the president and criticizing the Democratic Party. And he's going to go there and basically give an implicit endorsement of the Republican Party and Donald Trump. I don't understand why any Democrat would sit there and applaud for Netanyahu doing this, putting aside even the more urgent moral question, which is that he's prosecuted this war in a horrendous way with civilian lives lost. So my hope is, and my expectation is, that you're going to have 100 Democrats not go. Jim Clyburn, who's not traditionally the progressive Democrat, is actually talking about having an alternative forum to put something constructive out about the Middle East and peace and ending this war and releasing the hostages.
Congressman, talk to us a little bit about that. So President Biden, he famously, maybe he won't listen to the progressive members, but he's going to listen to Jim Clyburn. Clearly a huge portion of his coalition, people like Chris Van Hollen and others, have spoken out against the war. You will have more insight into us. What explains Biden's, the bear hug strategy, despite, Bibi in many ways been more disrespectful to President Biden than he almost was to Barack Obama. So what explains the affinity there, both between Biden, the state of Israel, and then the people around him too, who don't necessarily have the same generational connection?
Well, Barack Obama was actually a break from the traditional unconditional support of even the far-right government of Israel. It doesn't seem like it because he wanted to go even further for two states. But Biden has always been more aligned with Netanyahu. He's always been unconditional in his support of Israel since 1972. So he comes at this from a different generational perspective. And then when he has in any way broken from unconditional absolute support of Netanyahu, he's gotten criticized by the ADL, by AJC, by the Northern Federation of Jewish Americans. And so I think that his people are looking at this and saying, well, we want to play it safe. But what they aren't realizing is they're upsetting everyone, and that the real solution here is an end to the war and a release of the hostages that I still believe President Biden can effectuate.
Yeah. So let's actually dig into that. Let's put B2 up on the screen. So as you know, as you alluded to, Prime Minister Netanyahu put on a video in English, by the way, claiming that the Biden administration was slow walking critical weapons. I wish that was the case. But as far as we know, there has been one shipment of 2,000-pound bombs that they haven't even blocked. They've just sort of slow rolled it. Bibi again doubled down. He said there's been a, quote, dramatic drop in U.S. weapons deliveries for Israel's war effort in Gaza. This in spite of the fact, again, the White House really rejects that. You can put B3 up on the screen. They say they reject these new accusations. We aren't going to keep responding to the prime minister's political statements. We look forward to constructive consultations with Defense Minister Gallant in Washington this week. He's here this week. He also is under looming indictment from the International Criminal Court for war crimes as well, Yoav Gallant as well. So, just speak a little bit to what the Biden administration is thinking about here and what could possibly shift their orientation. Because as you're pointing out, they've done everything that the Israelis have wanted them to do. Every time there's been a red line drawn, like with regard to Rafah, they've walked away from it and let Israel move forward. We're about to talk in the next segment about this looming war with Hezbollah, which we've seemed to have effectively given a green light to. So, is there a red line? What would it take to actually change the policy here?
Well, for me and many progressives, the biggest issue is the morality, the issue that 37,000 civilians have died, that Netanyahu continues to bomb sites where women and children are being killed. But putting that aside, if you're an average American, ordinary American, you're looking at the president of the United States being bullied. And this is, I think, the biggest issue, that the president doesn't look strong. Netanyahu puts out a video basically punching the administration in the gut. And the president's response isn't that Netanyahu isn't telling the truth. The president's response is we look forward to a constructive conversation
Dialogue.
with Gallant. I mean, at some point, Bill Clinton said America is the superpower and we're going to act like the superpower. And yes, Israel's an ally, but we're going to call the shots. And I actually think that that is the biggest issue that the administration is facing, that it looks like not only is he bear hugging Netanyahu, but that he's not an active, aggressive, assertive actor on the world stage. He tried to do that with the peace plan for finally calling for a permanent ceasefire, which I supported, but it needs more teeth. He needs to have the ability to get it done.
What are the levers? Yeah. What are the levers he could use? Because what you'll hear from his defenders is, well, he tried. He's trying. He wants a ceasefire. He gave a speech. What are the actual levers that could put pressure on the Israelis to change course? Because clearly the speech isn't enough. The, leaks to Barak Ravid and other reporters that they're having tough conversations behind the scenes. Obviously that's not enough. So what are some of the affirmative levers that the U.S., that the President of the United States could use to actually change behavior here?
I could do what 37 House Democrats voted to do, which is to stop offensive weapons to Netanyahu. He could get aid across into Gaza. I mean, what is Israel going to stop American tanks, American convoys from going in with aid? Of course, we could get aid into to Gaza if we wanted to. He could be much more assertive at the United Nations, but he could just tell Netanyahu, look, you're going to end the war, or I'm going to say that both you and Hamas aren't coming to the table. So far, every statement is Hamas isn't coming to the table. And that is correct in some. I mean, look, Hamas, they need to continue to put pressure on Hamas. I mean, Hamas is not some angelic actor here, but there's never been a statement saying, well, look, Netanyahu continues to have an aim of the eradication of Hamas, and he's not coming to the table. You know who said that? Benny Gantz.
Right.
Benny Gantz is actually willing to say that Netanyahu isn't acting in good faith there.
So there's a very important point. Let's put this up there because we have the actual statement you referenced, which is the White House official rejecting Netanyahu's new accusation. He says, we aren't going to keep responding to the prime minister's political statements. We look forward to constructive consultations with the defense minister in Washington this week. That seems to me a tacit admission that the Israelis rely almost entirely at this point on U.S. provided weapons. Can you give us insight into that, and then what any future incursion in Lebanon would look like? Could that, invite a Biden administration so-called cutoff? Because that appears to me, a far more dangerous situation, perhaps even than what's happening in Gaza right now.
It is. And the administration keeps saying, well, what has worked is we've avoided a regional war. Well, now it looks like we aren't even avoiding a regional war. And that is why what we need to do is make it clear to Gallant, to Netanyahu, that we're going to stop the offensive weapons. They need to come with a permanent ceasefire and a release of hostages. Now, if they agree to those terms, and Hamas still does not agree to release the hostages, it'll be clear for the world to see that Israel was willing to do everything to stop the war, and Hamas still isn't acting. But they've never put the pressure on Netanyahu to do that. And that is the only thing that's going to stabilize the Middle East. It's the only thing, in my view, that is going to help the president also politically, is bringing this war to an end.
Yeah, well, and that's a key point because we don't really have leverage with Hamas. We don't fund Hamas, right? We don't have the sort of diplomatic tools we can use with Hamas. Israel is wholly dependent on us, both diplomatically and directly in terms of weapons, to continue their prosecution of the war. So I think that's really key for people ultimately to understand. Going back to this speech to Congress from Netanyahu, what is your prediction of how many Democrats boycott? You mentioned that alternative forum, or et cetera. Take us inside some of the plans that are happening on the Democratic side of the aisle among people who are not going to attend to try to expose what's going on and dissent from the Biden administration policy.
Well, just to be clear, this speech is going to be a one-way lecture by Netanyahu, criticizing the Democratic Party, criticizing our president, and supporting implicitly Donald Trump and Republicans. I just don't see how, as a Democratic congressperson, you can show up and applaud that and stand up again and again and applaud that. So I hope and expect that over 100 Democrats aren't going to show up, 100 House Democrats. It was about 60 when he came, when Obama was president. And what Representative Representative Clyburn is talking about is having a constructive conversation with Jewish Americans, Palestinian Americans, and others about what a two-state solution looks like, a secure Israel, a secure Palestine, and having the Gulf allies involved in getting there, having the United States, in my view, recognize a Palestinian state that 143 other countries have done, but having a constructive vision. Look, I talk to everyone. You know that. I go on all the shows. And I've said I would be fine in a group talking to Netanyahu. But what I'm not going to do is sit there and applaud while he tells blatant untruths like he has on the video.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I also wanted to ask you, Congressman, obviously you're supporting Joe Biden for re-election. There are many young people who feel that his support of what they and I and many other international observers see as a genocide is a red line in terms of morality. You know, what's your message to them? And also for you, is there a red line beyond what you would say, you know what? Listen, on these issues, I do feel like he's better than Trump, but this is just a red line morally for me. I cannot support someone who is complicit in a genocide.
I understand people's frustration, their moral concerns, and I certainly can't lecture them to make a choice. And I also think that the administration's underestimating this issue in terms of the outcome. They look at the polls and they say it's only 1 or 2% of people who care. What they don't realize is that among the organizers, among the activists, this is the only thing people are talking about. So if you want to get the president's message out on healthcare, on rent, on the economy, you're not being able to do it, or on climate, because all the groups are talking about Palestine. My message to them is at the end of the day, I want peace there. I want a Palestinian state living side by side with an Israel state, and I believe that we have a much better chance of making progress towards that with a Joe Biden and a Democratic coalition that keeps growing with progressive ranks than we do with Donald Trump, who's basically going to even bear hug Netanyahu stronger and give carte blanche to the extreme right. Politics is a tough business where we don't always get the ideal, and we make progress inch by inch. That's the case, but I certainly wouldn't shame anyone if they are voting their conscience on this.
All right. Well, we at least get that. No shame here from a politician. All right. We appreciate you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. It's great to see you.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the